That's what I'm talking about, son. Get you some of that daggone pie.
Woo-hoo! Looky there. There's your bug-eyed big one right there.
Getting started. We're getting started.
Here's what I'm talking about. Gosh dang gorilla.
Let's go, baby. Straight meat. God, look at that biggin.
All right, welcome in everybody to the BAM Pod. I'm your host, Big Ed, and on the line tonight, we've got the brand new champion of bass fishing from the BAM Trail, Joe Mariani, who just took it to him out at Lake Berryessa. Joe, thanks for coming in, man. Everybody wants to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. We're gonna have a lot of fun talking about that epic week at Berryessa that we just had. So let's get into it.
Yeah, this is going to be, we've got you on first, and then right after this, we're going to have Mike White, the co-angler champion. It's going to be a nice little half-hour show here. So I'm going to get you to spill all the beans out there for everybody that wants to go out to, Lake Berryessa and catch a bunch of fish and do what the champ does, man. You went out there, you won by 633. A little over 6 pounds. That's a pretty good tournament right there. You had some really good weights on day one, day two. Was there any one thing that you were just keying on out there on Lake Berryessa that you can kind of share with us about? If guys are going out there and they want to look and go fishing, this is what you would look for?
I mean, the main thing that I ended up keying on, it wasn't my game plan going into it to key on, was big rock, big hard structure. And I think that all happened quickly with how cold it was in the mornings that we had. I was initially planned on fishing grass, which they're still in the grass, but I think the fish are starting to move to that hard structure, the more wintertime areas. And that's what I gradually moved. I moved with the fish there, which it wasn't my initial plan, but that's where they took me.
Okay, so I saw a bunch of guys fishing grass, and I know that the rocks kind of went there, but like you said, you were going after grass right off the bat. What do you think with it? Was it just the fact that it started to change? Is the water getting colder, so they're going towards more heat? What is it that kind of pulled them with those rocks that you think?
Yeah, I think what it was the temperatures were dropping big time. I think the bait was moving away from the shallow areas, moving into the creek, more of the creek bottoms, and there's a lot of points on Berryessa with rock that run straight into the creek channels. And I think that was kind of a big deal. I noticed one of the days that when the best bite window happened for me was the bait just showed up right off the creek channel. They just moved up onto this point, and I started catching the fish, almost every cast. And that kind of, got me dialed in on what was happening. And then when the sun would warm up, I would start seeing the fish pull off the rock, start glowing on the Panoptics. And I was like, okay, it's an afternoon deal. It's a warming up deal. And then, you got the grass. It's starting to die a little bit in areas. Some spots are more alive than others.
Okay.
And, I think if you weren't on the perfect grass stretch, they just weren't in it, and it made it tough.
Now, was there, this is that time of year on Berryessa that I love going out in November. I love throwing those big spoons and throwing, bait. It seems like this is when the bait balls start to ball up. They start to, die off here and there. They get crushed. And those fish are sitting down there waiting. How much of this, what was the bait that you were really focusing on? Was there a jig bite? Was it crawdads? Was it bait fish? What were you doing out there? What were you mainly, trying to throw?
Yeah, I originally, like I said, November, the bait balls, it's an A-rig bite on Berryessa. That's what November is. It's always an A-rig bite, but it wasn't this week. It was not an A-rig bite. I think the full moon had something to play with that. So full moon comes out, it makes you think of crawdads. Crawdads start spawning. The crawdads are moving around in the nighttime. So And Mark White, you know, he actually keyed me onto this in the last day when we were talking about it. It was just like, it just felt too good for a jig bite, you know? And
Yeah.
that's kind of that last day I just stuck with that jig, and they really were biting that jig. I mean, it was the best jig bite that I've ever seen on Berryessa.
Wow.
For me.
Yeah, that's impressive to say because you fish there a lot.
Yeah, it was by far the best jig bite I've ever seen on that lake.
Hmm.
And I
Well,
don't
I mean,
think
that's good. That's good because, like you said, I feel like bait fish is what most people are thinking when they think, when they think Berryessa. Now, I I don't even know if you can answer this question, but if you were to go back out there tomorrow, would you be throwing the A rig? Would you be throwing spoons? What would you be looking for that bait fish, or would you go right back to that jig bite and hope it was still there?
I would probably go back to that jig bite. It was so good that it would be hard to not go back to it. And I would definitely have an A-rig tied on. I threw it so much because of the past times that I've had on Berryessa in November. It's always an A-rig bite.
Okay.
And if I were to go out tomorrow, I'd probably be throwing that jig and a Senko because it's imitating kind of the same thing, just a little more finessey. But I would be throwing a jig and a Senko if I were to go out tomorrow.
Now, what's the colors you're throwing right now? Is it just green pumpkins and dark colors, or what's the color out there?
Yeah, strictly green pumpkin. That's all that I threw. I didn't even try browns. The water's still clear out there,
Mm.
and you know, you would watch the fish on your Panoptics. They would come up to your baits and they would nose down on it. You could just tell they weren't super aggressive, so you wanted to stay as natural as you could. So green pumpkin is hard to beat.
Okay. I mean, that's a great, that's a good, a little great, prop for everybody going out there. Now, were you throwing lead-headed jigs? I mean, I guess everything's like, but were you throwing like hula grubs kind of stuff, or were you throwing jigs?
Yeah, I was actually throwing a decent sized jig. I was just throwing a green pumpkin, a dirty jigs. It was
Okay.
all green pumpkin, and then I was throwing a Rapala Crush City. I forget the name of the craw, but it has the rubber floating action on it, so the jig would
Uh-oh.
actually stand up. So I
Okay.
thought that maybe that would get me a couple extra bites, but that was kind of the exact setup that I was throwing.
All right, going out there hitting big rocks. Now, the other question, I say, were you throwing jig? Were you throwing, would you go back out there? Would you go back to what would make you start targeting grass again compared to the rocks? Or would you it's like, you know what, the grass bite's over. They are in the rocks right now, and that's where you would head back to?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably go back to the rocks just because of the way the weather sets up. And it was hard. It was really hard for me to get away from the grass because of the months before in October, the bite that was going on in the grass. We were catching a lot of big fish in October out of that grass. So it was super hard for me to get away from those areas that we were catching big fish out of the grass. Like I kept going back to them, and I could just see on the Panoptics, it just was not the same. Looking at my live scope, I just knew that bite was over, and I had to keep going back to the rocks. And that was what's super cool is if you didn't have live scope, you wouldn't be able to make the decisions that we make today. You know, I get to see
Right.
what's actively going on in front of me. I get to see what's going on the rocks, the bait moving up, the fish showing up when the water's warming up, when that sun comes out, the fish start popping up off those rocks. And then looking in the grass, I'm not seeing the fish moving around, the bait in there like it was a month before. So that's what kind of made me move to the rocks, was looking at
Okay.
my live scope. That keyed me into everything.
Now, you came in day one with, I think it was a little over 20 pounds. Day two, same kind of numbers. Day three, same kind of, I mean, 64,
Yeah.
56, day three, 3 days. And you had it's been out there on social media right now. You've been posting that, this was the winning moment. You had bring in a giant there, get that thing in the boat. There's the hug. You know, day one coming in, what were you thinking you needed? Was that your total deal? It's like, hey, I need 20 pounds a day and I'm gonna smack this, or was it less?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning to the BAM Pod tonight. I hope you're enjoying the show. But right now, we're going to take a commercial break and talk to you a little bit about Excel Marketing LLC. They're your local TV expert, and they have something to tell you about Dish TV. If technology, value, and customer satisfaction are important to you, then it's time to cut the cable cord once and for all. Upgrade your TV experience and start saving with Dish today. Call Excel Marketing LLC at 209-542-4129 or visit them on the web at excel.getdish.com. They're Excel Marketing LLC, your locally owned, operated, and trusted satellite TV experts. Now, back to the BAM Pod.
To be honest with you, I did not think it was going to be like that. I was thinking if you caught 18 and a half a day, you would have a very good shot at winning if nobody caught a giant fish, like a 10 plus pounder. I thought 18 and a half a day. I can't believe what I ended up doing out there over those 3 days, because that is like catching 20 pounds a day on Berryessa is unbelievably tough. So
Yeah,
thought,
and you did it really well in the fact that, again, you beat Ryan Hall by 6 pounds, over 6 pounds. He was fishing really well. And this isn't even now. You got to give it a little bit to Ryan. This is not his home body of water, doesn't know it very well, goes out there, fishes like just an absolute stud out there because he brings in 58. What are you thinking day two? He's right on your heels. He was only, 2 pounds back on day two. Now you got Championship Sunday. What's kind of going through your head right there?
Yeah, I woke up and I was super nervous. I'm like, Ryan's going to catch him again. I got to catch him, because what he did out there was pretty spectacular. I mean, he was catching them good. And his weight increased the second day, so I'm like, he's figuring something out. He's coming for me. So I was super nervous. I told myself if I caught 20 that last day, I would be happy. I'd be content with what I did. I made him have to go catch him, and that was kind of what I said. I was like, if I could get 20, I'll be happy if I lost, but anything lower than that, I would be kind of upset with myself.
Well, I'll tell you what, you come from winners. You're right there. This is your home body of water. You had an idea of what it was going to take. You surpassed that idea. You came up, you throw 20s on the scales, and go through that little bit of emotion when that bass did come in, that big one. That was like the dagger right there. I feel like that was. I'm looking at that video going, he knew right then and there. Congratulations on the boat. This is the one. Was that going through your? Was that what was going through your head at that point?
Yeah, I'm getting chills thinking about that moment, because that fish jumped, and I was like, Mark he grabs it, and he goes, that's the boat right there. When that fish jumped, Mark White on the back of my boat said that, and my heart dropped. I knew that was the fish. I'd been talking about that fish since. I got in the boat fight. I'm one big bite away from winning this tournament. And when I got that thing in the boat, I felt really good. I knew that I put the pressure on Ryan at that point, and I could fish comfortably, and try and pick up a couple more good bites to really solidify my bag.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome to see, coming up on that stage, watching him sitting there, with all this going on. It was, it was fun to watch. It was a really fun tournament. I mean, there was a lot of good bags that came in. It was not. I thought, with fall coming on, it might be some lower numbers. It got cold, it got windy, the full moon came out. It was really ramping up to be kind of a tough tournament, but in the end, I was watching those numbers and it was pretty amazing with some of those. There was a lot of fish over that 40 pound, 50 pound, in that 50 pound range. It was a lot of bags up there.
Yeah.
With you being right there, is that
so much for us?
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say, is that pretty normal on Berryessa for November to be bigger bags, or is it like, hey, you know what, it gets tough and you've got to kind of adapt?
Yeah. I've seen both. I've seen a November where everybody, a lot of 10 pounders are biting, like giant fish are biting in November. Full moon, there's giant bass biting. You know, the trout, the lake turns over, the trout start going around everywhere, and the big ones are eating the trout. So I've seen it before where there's giant bags being caught, and then I've seen it before where 17, 16 pounds is like a really good bag. So you just kind of never know what's going to happen. Like, that's why that last day I was like, Brian could catch 30, anything can happen out there. That's what's so cool about that lake is it could go from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs, because there's so many big fish in that lake.
Well, and that leads you to a question right there. You talk about the trout moving up, that sort of thing. Are you, I don't even know, are you a big swim bait guy? Did you break them out and say, you know what, if I get a giant, I can put a nail in this coffin on day 2? Did you pick up that thing and start throwing it day 1, day 2, anything like that?
Yeah, I probably had about 5 bites on a big swim bait the first day. I caught one of them. I caught 2 on the big swim bait the first day, and then that bite kind of started to go away. I think we still had the low pressure hanging around from the days of practice with the rain and the storm that kind of rolled through just a little bit. And they bit that swim bait the first day, and then that bite kind of went away, and I couldn't go away from it because, like you said, you get one big bite on that bait, and it's, you put the nail in the coffin. So, and I know in November you got to be throwing a big swim bait. So I was trying, and I couldn't get away from it, and I finally had to just pick up that jig and be slow and methodical about the way that I fished the areas that I did.
For guys that want to go out there and throw swim baits, I mean, this is a lake that you can catch 14, 50. There's big fish in there, right? I mean,
absolutely.
And if you want to throw, I mean, you're just down the road from Clear Lake, it's just over a couple little hills, right? What's your swim bait of choice out there?
I like throwing the mag, the big trout 11-inch swim bait. I like throwing that a lot. You can catch, they bite the Huddleston. That's that's a go-to. An S waver, the light trout, the yellow trout one, that one is a go-to. And then a depth 250. Those are your 2 glide bait sets you need, and then those are your 2 soft body swim bait set. You can always go to and get bites on it. And if you want to look for a point with a little bit of brush on it and some big boulders, one that goes way out there, that you can make a long cast down the middle and just crawl that thing up there, right up the point, and that'll definitely produce some bites if you're looking for a big swim bait bite.
Okay, now, I mean, this is kind of I don't know. It's a unique question, I guess. Were you just focused? There are so many different fish in there. Let me preface this by saying you've got big smallmouth, you've got some big largemouth, and you've got some big spots. Was there any one that you were focusing on specifically? Like, you know what? I'm only going after this, and if I get them, I get them, and if I don't, I don't.
Right. I mean, I'm specifically going after largemouth. If you get the last day I caught a 4.5 pound spotted bass. If you get those, they're always a bonus. They're mixed in. The first day, like I said, I got 5 or 6 bites on the swim bait. I went 3 casts in a row. One was a 5.5 pound largemouth. One was a 3.5 pound spot, and one was a 3 pound smallmouth, all on a swim bait.
Wow.
So if that doesn't tell you that they're always mixed together, you never know what you're going to get. So that's Berryessa for you. You could almost win tournaments off of either species. And most of the time, everyone's going to bring in all 3 species because they're all big out there, But you predominantly want to target the largemouth.
Yeah, because I see a lot of people do that, and I heard, some I don't want to say rumblings, but I heard some people doing that, talking about, I knew I had to go catch, my limit at least on day 1, and they would run to the river, or they would run, this sort of thing. Are you one of those guys that likes fishing the river specifically? Are you the main body kind of guy? Are you, hey, I want to go all the way up north? What is your, Puda Creek? What's your kind of your main fun spot, your best spots to go out there on?
Tackle Warehouse has been the premier online tackle shop since 2003, with a huge selection of not only the latest and greatest from the biggest brands, but the hard-to-find regional specialties as well. Tackle Warehouse. Click, save, fish.
Yeah, I mean, my initial game plan, because I thought it was so tough during practice, was I ran into the Narrows on a spot of schooling fish that I thought I could catch 15 pounds of spotted bass in an hour. And I ran to that spot, and they had all evacuated. There was nothing left. So I was like, okay, well, this is how day one's going to go. But, yeah, I like to fish all over that lake. Sometimes I'll be in Poudre Creek and Pope Creek where all the bait's at, and other times I'll be only on the main lake, fishing grass, targeting strictly largemouth. So, like I said, it just kind of depends on the time of the year and what is going on out there. But you can win a tournament anywhere on that lake. You really can.
Yeah, that's what I kind of heard. People were all over the place on the lake where they were catching them. It wasn't like there was a big congregation of, how many guys did you fish around and how many guys, was that one of those things? Were you sharing water out there with anybody, or were you pretty much alone all day other than your co-angler?
I'm going to tell you, I was alone all day. I had about 6 spots on the lake, and throughout all 3 days, I never saw a single guy on one of the spots that I fished. So I was pretty much alone. I never really had any problems with spots being fished, which was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah. I mean, at the caliber of angler you are, and after day one, it's like you normally hear, it's like, well, the guys saw that I caught them, and then they ran up and were getting up there. But sounds like that wasn't an issue, and you were catching them, and we're good. I heard of some other ones, and and I'll ask you because honestly, the other guys that I kind of heard from, there was a rattle trap bite out there. We saw some video. I saw some video of it. I saw that sort of thing. Does that ever cross into what you like to do? Is that something that you're out there throwing the LVs or rattle traps or any of those things?
Yeah, I love throwing an LV 500. I do it all the time at Clear Lake, and I could not get on that bite. I couldn't figure it out. That's why I was like, props to you, Ryan, because you figured out the bite to, you win tournaments out here on that bite. The LV 500 is like the bite to find, and I never once found it. I couldn't get bit on it. So when I couldn't get bit on that out of the grass, I had to, abandon to the rocks and start finesse fishing kind of.
All right. I mean, that's, it's one of those things when you're talking about tournaments and you're talking about the way you guys go out there and approach these things, the level of expertise you have on this water, especially, it's always interesting to hear some of the bites that are going on, some of the things that are going on, and how one guy can get it, one guy can't. This changes up, like you're talking about. It's an egg rig kind of year, or type of year, or time of year is this is when you want to throw A rigs. This is when you want to throw the big spoons. I heard guys catching them on the flutter spoons. It just seems like a lake that is so massive and has so many different bites going on. It's becomes target rich, I guess, in the way that you just want to hit the spots you hit and then find that one bait that's working. Because I don't think if I ask, I asked Mark, what if he hits 3 different things or watch 3 different anglers throw 3 different things, I'm gonna guess he's gonna say yes, but I'm not gonna ask him that question. So
it really is the most diverse fishery in California, with the way that, a guy could win it in the creek, a guy could win it fishing grass, a guy could win it fishing rocks, a guy could win it fishing the middle of the lake. Like, anything could happen on Berryessa. That's what makes it so exciting. And that's why this tournament was so exciting to watch, because you literally do not know what's going to happen out there. Like, it changes and what's going on. It's just, that's why I love that lake. It makes it so much fun.
Well, I'll tell you what, we got about 6 or 7 minutes left, but I'm going to ask you one last question. Then I'm going to kind of turn this over to you to tell everybody who you are and what you are. But you said something on the stage about was waiting for this tournament from the very first time I saw it on the schedule. This was what you were waiting for. This is what you were looking for. After you saw the whole circuit, you fished the circuit, you made it, you qualified for this. How excited were you before this thing even started? Like, I made it. This is mine.
Yeah, I had been talking about this tournament, like I said, since I saw it. I was so excited to finally have an opportunity to fish multiple days on Berryessa, because I know what it takes to be consistent out there. Like, it is the hardest lake to be consistent on, because you got to be changing. Like, at the snap of the finger, anything can happen out there. So you got to be moving with your fish, or finding new fish, or having some areas that you didn't quite pressure too hard, because the lake just doesn't reload like other lakes do. So I was just so stoked to finally have a chance at a pro-am at Berryessa. And it's never, since I started bass fishing, there hasn't been a pro-am event up there. So
Wow.
I couldn't wait for it.
Well, there was one up there and you won it. Now, Joe, this is kind of the time I turn this thing over. I let you guys, everybody just listen to you drop this knowledge. Everybody's out there. There are some people that know exactly who you are. There are some people that don't know who you are from a hole in the wall. Dude, this is your time right here. Tell everybody who you are, how they can follow you, how they can find you, and, talk about Joe.
Yeah. I mean, I from a small town here in Winters, and I randomly got into bass fishing, and I fell in love with the tournament aspect of it all, the competition and the camaraderie that comes with all your buddies that you make, and how much fun it is. So that's kind of, I really am not all into the, fishing every day or whatever. I just like competing for, the trophies and everything that comes with it. That is what it's what gets me excited, is going out there and competing against the best guys out here on the West Coast. And other than that, everyone else can find me on Instagram, Joe Mariani Fishing. That's where I post all my my fishing stuff, and that's about it.
You said something right there that I got to ask you another question. Do you want to fish the Super 60?
I'm really excited to see how the Super 60 goes. I didn't have the opportunity to make it happen this year, so I won't be doing it this year. But I'm excited for you guys. I love the BAM with everything that you guys are doing. You guys put 100% effort into all the tournaments. I mean, you got the boats running around, the cameras. You guys are putting the media out for all the fishermen. So I'm excited to see what happens with the Super 60. And then if I can make it happen the next year, I would be stoked to be able to hop in that.
Now, you've been around a little bit now? You said you kind of got into it. Have you seen another circuit that's giving you this much exposure? You have a TV show coming up in probably a couple months of what you just did out there. People are going to be able to tune in on the Outdoor Action Network or on our YouTube channel and watch you out there catching these fish. Have you had that much exposure with somebody else?
Absolutely not. I mean, you guys are the only ones out here on the West Coast right now giving everybody a chance to see I had people reaching out to me that I don't even know who they were until this weekend, because they saw what happened,
Yeah.
People are texting me and all that. So that's super cool. The type of exposure that is produced from these tournaments is why I keep encouraging other people to come out and fish them, because you don't have that opportunity elsewhere.
And that's, when you say that, there was a heck of a field out there, on the co-angler side, on the pro side. I mean, I know that this was the championship and these guys qualified for it, but all season long, there have been a lot of really good anglers that have come out and fished this thing. And and I always hear anglers say this, and I'm hoping it's true when they say it. I want to fish against the best I can. Did you find that this year while you were fishing this, you qualified for the champ? Did you fish against some of the best guys that you've ever fished against?
Hey folks, Randall and I want to talk to you real quick about choosing the right electronics mount for your bass boat.
Mark and I have been partnered with Bass Boat Technologies from the very beginning, and we know the quality and effort that Van Foster has put into this company.
Custom, that's the one thing that I think about whenever I think of Bass Boat Technologies. Van Foster has spent years, not hours, years perfecting these mounts. He works with just about every bass boat company out there, most models for every bass boat company out there. He has spent the time working on these bass boats. So what you get is a custom fitted mount, not some mass produced universal mount for every bass boat out there. Van makes them custom fit for your bass boat.
Bass Boat Technologies also makes a lot of other custom parts. Seat pedestal plugs, tool holders, steering wheel spacers, and battery trays are all made with the same attention to detail that Bass Boat Technologies is known for.
Bass Boat Technologies is a vital part of our livelihood, and it's very important to your overall boating experience also.
Absolutely, and that's why we choose Bass Boat Technologies. Check them out at bassboattech.com. You'll be glad you did.
I think so. I think everybody wants to fish against the best field that they could possibly fish against because it makes it that much more competitive, that much more rewarding when you win. So, the BAM, and I think it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better. I think this was just the start for you guys. I think people finally realized what's going on, and they're going to hop on the bandwagon. That's what I think.
Yeah, I know. We're all hoping that the pro-ams really blow up and we get a lot more anglers showing up and we get a lot more boats coming out and seeing everything. I've heard there's a kind of a big rumbling going on. It's going to make my job harder, but I'm up for the task. We'll see what happens up there on the stage. But hey, man, Joe, thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking the time, giving up some of your knowledge, giving up some of your secrets, and the people out there. I always say this, we're gonna sign off on with Joe. We're gonna switch over to Mark, talk to a co-angler. But if you didn't hear what he had to say, go back and listen again because he dropped a bunch of knowledge on you, and you should absolutely 100% get that knowledge because this guy, he lives on this lake, he fishes this lake, and he just became the champ on this lake. Joe, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. Oh, say it.
I've got one more thing to say. I would love for BAM to come out with a team series. That's like what I've been talking about all year. If BAM could come out with a team series, I think it would be awesome. That is my last thing to say.
Well, I'll tell you what, give us a little time. We're not trying to kill Mark off right off the bat. So, yeah, one more thing on his plate right now. He just put out the Scholastic Series, so we'll see what happens in the future. It may happen. There's been a couple people that have asked for it. I want to say more than a couple, but we'll see what happens, man. But Joe, again, thank you for coming on. Thank you for doing this. And everybody, get ready. Up next, Mark White, the co-angler champion.
We've paired one of the most iconic hulls in the history of bass boats with a proven lineup of trusted accessories. We're bringing you best-in-class value and performance, leaving others in your wake. Turnkey value, turnkey performance. The Pantera 2 is an overachiever in the 19-foot category. Once you hit the throttle, you'll feel the rush, and there's no looking back.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the second part of our show. And on the line, I have got the co-angler champion, Mr. Mark White, right there from Lake Berryessa. He went out there, stood behind three of the West's best pro anglers, and had to sack them up behind him, and he did it, and he took home the championship, man. Mark, welcome in, brother.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, there was some stiff competition on the coast side. I mean, you beat out Dante Ray by just a little over 2.5 pounds. He had 44.11 behind your 46.89. You got to fish with some of the great ones out there. You got to fish with the champion on the last day, Joe Mariani. That has to be exciting, dude, going out there and fishing with these guys. But I don't want to take anything away from being a co-angler because it is a lot of hard work to go back there behind somebody that's, it's their water, their kind of thing. They put in the work to find them, and you have to go out there and kind of respect it. But at the same time, you're there to catch fish, man. Let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be that co-angler and to watch a guy win it right in front of you. You know you're on the right fish because he's catching them, and you have to go back there and do that. Let's talk about a little bit about what it's like to be that co-angler, man.
Yeah. So, on day 3 there, that was tough. It's hard to fish behind Joe. I mean, he's a vacuum cleaner and he's a heck of a fisherman. So, and he was on a terrific spot that he used all 3 days. And, it was a very specific, like cast specific spot. And I'm aware of that same spot because I fish this lake almost as much as Joe does. So, and I understood that, and I understood what he's fishing for, and and I did the best I could, and just made the best of all my opportunities from the back of the boat there, and was able to catch a limit on the last day, which was desperately needed for sure, even though I had that lead.
Yeah, that's talking about having that lead going into it. And I asked Joe this question, day 1, you go out there. Now, again, you live right on this lake. You know what it takes to win out there. And he said this, I think, best. It's really tough to be consistent on Berryessa because it's one of those ones that changes all the time. Now, throw in how much harder it is to not only watch these fish change, but you have to change anglers. You have to be in the back of somebody else's boat. You can't, you don't know where they're going exactly. You don't make those decisions. You just have to go back there. I really believe that your job in the backseat of that boat is so much harder just in the way it is. Just in the fact that you don't get to make those decisions. You just have to turn it on and go. Do you fish consistently as a co-angler, or are you a person that goes out and it's like, no, I go out and fish that lake and I'm aggressive so that when you do get behind somebody, how to fish, I guess, effectively out of the back of the boat?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this was my first year fishing as a pro-am and fishing from the back of a boat. So I've always run a boat for probably the last 15 years of fishing team tournaments. So I'm usually the one always making decisions. So that was very tough for me to adapt during the Shasta and Oroville tournaments because I wasn't used to that. And then I kind of learned, and obviously it showed during Clear Lake and then this event. Thankfully, with my history on Berryessa, I kind of knew, like I was going out and practicing and making all my decisions, running my boat. And I got one practice day during the 2 days of practice. And I mean, I caught 23 pounds out there by myself running my boat. And I was running completely different patterns than what all 3 of my pros fished. So I kind of learned to adapt, and I tried to set myself up for knowing that there was a good chance I wouldn't get to fish the way I wanted to fish. And so I fell back on my old reliable, and, that was fishing a jig, because I knew that this time of year, those fish will eat a jig and big fish eat jigs. So I knew that was going to be my best opportunity if I wasn't able to fish the way I fished during practice.
Joe said that same thing. He said this was probably the best jig bite that he has seen in a long time on that lake. The jig bite just really opened up, turned on. So I can ask you that question, is it something that you've seen before, or is it one of those things like this is a really good year for it?
I've seen it before. It was good over this weekend. I'll tell you this, like my opportunity on day 1, I didn't have a ton of opportunity to fish the jig, but when I did, it worked because I caught all 5 keepers on it in that limited amount of time. And then day 2, fishing behind Greg, the way he was fishing set up beautifully for me. He was in areas that I'm very comfortable with, that there were fish all around the boat, every which direction. So made it very easy to fish the jig. And I caught a lot of fish on day 2 while fishing with Greg. it's the fish generally will always eat a jig on Berryessa, but this time of year it can be really good, and it's confidence bait that I have. I've won tournaments on this lake, ABAs and other tournaments fishing a jig, so it was something that I knew I was going to get the right bites doing it. I just had to be in those, target specific casts to really get the key bites.
I'm going to add, you mentioned, you said you're fishing with, I'm Greg Gutierrez, I'm guessing is who you're fishing with. That was day two, right? Okay. Who was your day one?
Day one was Zach Thompson.
So, not to put anybody on the spot or say anything about them in a negative light, but that is three pretty different anglers. How were they when you were fishing with them? I mean, are they as I look at that list right there and I go, these are some pretty different anglers, man. You had to do some serious adapting. But every one of those guys right there, they are 100% just like what you said. They are vacuum cleaners, man. Great job winning this thing. Yes, I gotta tell you, those three guys are not easy guys to fish behind. I've fished behind two of those guys, and I know that they are extremely tough to fish behind. How were they? Is that pretty accurate what I just said?
Yeah, no, 100%. What you just said is very accurate. They're all extremely talented fishermen. I mean, just look at their resumes, right? I mean, Greg is a legend and qualified and fished in 2 Bassmaster Classics, and all of them are great people. I enjoyed every moment fishing with them, and that's why I did this, was to really try and learn, right? That's kind of the mindset you have to have as being a co-angler, is you're not necessarily there to win it, you're there to learn during this experience,
right?
Because obviously they're making all the decisions and they're fishing the way they want to fish, so being able to adapt to that is very important. And they all of them had completely different styles of fishing, and I would say, like, day 3 Joe was fishing a very specific spot.
Right.
Day 2, Egg was fishing multiple different, like, just larger areas in general. And then day 1, Zach was fishing a completely different bite that he found during practice. So they were all fishing completely different, to be honest with you. But it was neat to see. I know Joe adapted on the last day, and I think he fished the same location, but he fished a little bit different bait than what he was catching them on day 1, because his day 1 bite kind of backed off a little bit, which I kind of figured would happen with the changing conditions that we kept getting during this tournament. So
yeah, it just really makes me look at you in a totally different way, man. You just went behind 3 guys who fish extremely well, extremely different, and you adapted, you changed. Are you looking to go forward to the front of the boat in the next year, or are you going to wait a couple years, or what are you going to do here?
I think I got to look at my work schedules and how this next season is going to work out, but I would like to try and run my boat, and run the front of the boat. So that'd be pretty cool to do. And I think I'm going to try and go. So
now, is that, you can look out here right now, and we have, there are some of the top pros out here right now, and they're already, they're out there pretty good. You moved to the front of the boat. Do you have aspirations of possibly going to that Super 60 as a pro?
I mean, if I do well enough, sure, that'd be great. But, I like to fish tournaments. I'm kind of like, what Joe mentioned the other day. I like the competition. I don't know that I would want to try and make a career out of this. I already have a career. So it's one of those things where I really just enjoy fishing. And when you add the competition aspect of it, it makes it fun. I don't know. Kudos to those guys that do this, for a living and fish as much as they do. I love fishing. I just don't know if I would be able to hang with that.
You don't want to put the ticket book down and go out there and start doing this for a living.
I mean, would be awesome. That'd be awesome, but that's a hard living to make. I mean, you got to be very, very consistent, and a lot of sponsorships, and everything else, right? Where I have that security of retirement and
I was going to say
everything else.
there's that's the part right there. I feel like, I don't know how long have you been doing that? How long have you been now? I'll let you tell everybody what you do for a living, and then they can make their own judgment here. But
I'll just say I'm in law enforcement. I've been doing it for 13 years.
what color vehicle do you drive?
A black one. Black.
So you go forward, and it is tough to give up that kind of security to say, you know what, I want to be a professional angler. I don't know. You're married, right? That was your wife that was out there?
Yes, my wife.
So,
Sarah.
so you're married. I'm fairly sure that it would be a tough one to say, you know what, I'm going to give all of this up. I'm going to give up my security, our retirement, everything else, and I'm just going to be a professional fisherman. That can't be an easy conversation to think about having, right?
You're right. Yeah.
But like you said, this is absolutely a wonderful sport, super fun to be in. And I've talked to Dante Ray. I'm talking to you now. I've talked to a couple of the co-anglers. I'm gonna get Chris Trumbull on here. I have a lot of respect watching you guys fish because I know who you're fishing behind. I've talked to these guys. I know these guys. I've fished behind some of these guys myself, and it is tough to go out there. But, talking about that on the BAM trail with these guys that are, some of them are making a living at it. Some of them are trying to make a living at it. Some of them have, when you're talking about a guy like Greg Gutierrez and Zach Thompson, also who have both been very, very successful in theirs. Both of them have careers outside of bass fishing as well. But, it is one of those things. I look at what you do behind those guys and, being a co-angler is tough, but how has it been just learning from these guys over these years? And I know everybody's kind of gonna, wants me to ask you, what were you throwing and all this stuff. And I'm gonna leave that kind of up to you if you want to go into that and how you want to dance around a little bit of what you were doing, because I don't want you to give up somebody else's water or anything else like that. But if you want to give up your the baits you were throwing and how you were doing it, there's a lot of people out there. But back to the first question is, how has it been this year learning from these guys?
Florida. The name alone evokes thoughts of sun, sand, and giant bass. Florida's unique ecosystems make it the world's best bass fishing destination. Whether you're a seasoned pro or a rookie to the sport, Florida offers endless fishing opportunities. The best part? You can catch giant bass year-round in any of the many freshwater bodies across the state. To learn more, visit mydfwc.com/trophy bass. Florida. Make your bass dreams come true.
Oh man, it's been excellent. I mean, I got to learn from quite a few of them, like different techniques, right? When I fished Shasta, I got to fish, with the day one leader on day two and see how it's done. And I didn't have very much experience on Shasta. So it's like, holy cow, the techniques that some of these guys are using, I would have never really thought would catch big fish. But obviously they're, water specific. So that was really cool to see. The other thing is watching some of the decision making on some of these guys, like when they decide to move a spot or when they decide to do certain things. That's stuff that you don't always get, from just fishing with another person or on a guided trip or something like that. I mean, I've only fished one guided trip in my life and I was like 17 years old.
Right.
And I learned a lot. That was with Bobby Barrick. But at the same time, there's stuff that you learn from watching some of these top pros because they're fishing for a lot of money and they're going to do the best they can to catch fish. So if you're back there paying attention, you're going to learn a lot by watching them. The other thing I kind of learned is I helped develop more confidence. I've always thought a lot of these people that are fishing as pros right now, I've fished against them for years in team tournaments. And a lot of those team tournaments I've won running a boat against some of these guys. So this helped to give me some confidence as well to realize I see how they're fishing. I know how I fish. I think I can compete, with these guys if I did decide to run a boat. So, we'll see.
Okay.
But I I don't know. It's fishing. At the end of the day, you're not necessarily fishing against all these other people. You're fishing against the fish, right? You still have to figure out the fish
100%.
and catch the fish. So that's what it all comes down to. And I don't know. There's all kinds of little tips and tricks that you learn. And some of the guys will give up more advice than others. I will say, like fishing with Greg, we chatted all day about different stuff. It didn't even pertain to Berryessa, and just some of the things I learned from him. Like, man, I'll never forget that. I'll keep that in my book, for in the future. So
right. Greg is notorious for being that like I feel like he really likes to teach people. Like it's part of his day, and it's part of what he truly enjoys doing.
Yeah, I would agree. For sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask, you learn, you fish behind these guys, and I don't want you to give up their things, what they were doing, but I'd love to hear how a co-angler who just became a champion co-angler, how do you go about fishing out of the back of these boats, and what are the baits, what are the techniques, what's the style, and how do you address trying to catch fish behind these guys?
Yeah, so I still go out and practice right before events. I try and figure out my own patterns, but I try not to just find one pattern. I try and, like for instance, for Berryessa, when I went out and practiced in my own boat, the one day that I went out and I smashed them on an LV and on a glide bait, right? I caught almost 23 pounds on those two baits, but I was also fishing shallow and around grass. I also moved away from that because I figured there's going to be a lot of people that are not familiar with Berryessa fishing this tournament, and they might want to go chase suspended fish, or they might want to, fish just rocky points or something like that. So I kind of went and found other bites that I knew would work as well. And then when you talk to your pro the evening before, you find out, hey, you can ask them, what do you plan to fish? Like what kind of water, so I can narrow down what I need to bring. I try not to bring the whole 8 rods that you're allowed to bring because I don't want confusion, right? I try and keep it simple. So I would recommend that, co-anglers focus on their strength techniques, right? So if you have a finesse tactic, like your spinning rod stuff, a shaky head or drop shot, whatever that may be. For me, I love fishing a jig. So I had 2 different jig rods all tournament ready to go, with 2 different size jigs. I brought LV rod just in case one of my pros wanted to go up shallow near some grass, right? I would be prepared for that. Brought that glide bait, because big fish on Berryessa eat trout. So I brought the glide bait. Unfortunately, all 3 days, they wouldn't touch it, even though I caught probably 10 fish on the glide bait the day before the tournament. So, but that's how conditions change, and you just have to be able to adapt to that. But I would say don't try and confuse yourself as a co-angler and bring too much stuff, right? The other thing with Berryessa, because it's my home water, I knew that this time of year, the Pud bite, that type of swim bait bite is usually fantastic. But when I went out and practiced, I didn't even bring that because I knew from the back of the boat I wasn't going to be throwing a Huddleston on the bottom just because I don't want to, be snagging up constantly. I probably went through $200 or $300 worth of jigs this weekend because I was just breaking them off, because I'm not going to expect my pro to go back and try and retrieve every jig for me, especially if they're on a specific spot, right? So I wouldn't want to do that with expensive swim baits down on the bottom. So I didn't even practice with that, even though I know that is an extremely good bite this time of year once that lake turns over. So, and that's usually how people catch 20 plus pound bags, is by throwing that big swim bait. But I didn't even practice it because I knew, hey, that's not something that's going to be very applicable from the back of the boat. So that might be a little long-winded, but
that's what that's what we're here for. People are going to tune into this show and they want to know what you did and what you were out there doing. Was there a color that you were focusing on? I mean, Joe gave up what his colors were and that sort of thing. Was there something in that jig that you were going for? Was it browns, greens, pumpkin? What was it?
Yeah, Yeah, so typically, I always kind of stick with my browns and green pumpkins, and that's what I did. I try to keep it simple. In general, I mean, some places like the Delta and crawdads might be really red, but here that brown green pumpkin tends to always work. So I just keep it simple. I don't try to overcomplicate it. The difference is typically how you fish the jig. That's the big key. They're not too line shy or anything like that, although I was throwing 14-pound fluorocarbon the whole weekend. But one of the big keys was the way I was fishing the jig. And even some of the pros I was fishing with, when they weren't fishing it the same way. So, and I'm not scared to give it up. I was fishing the jig uphill and it was getting snagged a lot. But I will tell you that the 3 biggest fish that I caught during this tournament, they all came when my jig was snagged. And I was back there trying to snap it free. And as soon as it would eventually pop free off the rock, had a big one on. So, something about that reaction out of it was key. And I think bringing it uphill was key. So, and both day 1 and day 2, I was fishing that jig uphill. Day 3, the way we were set up, the location for me off the back, the only uphill wouldn't have really been good because the fish weren't positioned there. So I was kind of fishing it downhill in an area. So, but those first 2 days, everything I did was pretty much uphill with the jig. And it was, every time I got an opportunity to do that, it was catching good ones. So.
All right. I mean, and that's the way those are the important facts that people kind of want to know and want to hear. And I know everybody listening right now, listening to this thing right now is going to be like, oh, that's something I couldn't try or I should try. And it's those small little things out of the back of the boat that other people don't get. And, when you have been out there and you're fishing for yourself, when you're out there practicing, is that something you practiced when you were out by yourself? Was it trying to, what if happens if I bring it uphill or downhill, or what was that part of it? Or was it just like day 1 came, this is how I could fish, so this is how I did fish and it worked?
Well, absolutely. I practiced it. So after Clear Lake, I had maybe three trips that I was able to get out in between work and go out fishing. And each time I threw the jig and I threw my other reaction baits and other stuff, but because I knew they would eat a jig. So when I wasn't getting them fishing it downhill, I changed directions, put the boat up shallow and brought it uphill. And I actually caught fish probably 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks before the tournament. I had like a 19-pound bag doing that. And nice. I thought to myself, and I need to remember to do this during the tournament if I'm stuck fishing a jig and I'm not getting bit, a specific way. I'm going to turn around and try and fire it way out deep and bring it uphill. But again, a lot of it is presentation. Just for a co-angler, focus on your confidence colors, right? So there might be some variations from lake to lake, but you're limited on really how much stuff you're going to bring on a boat. And if you narrow it down ahead of time and you have your confidence colors, then you can fish those with confidence, rather than spinning out of control and trying to go through tackle all day in the back of a boat. It's better to keep your line wet and in the water because that's where you're going to get bit. And a lot of times it's just the presentation. So you might just need to change it up if you're not getting bit. Just change the way you're fishing that bait.
Okay. You said at the beginning of this too, is that you were looking at size. The size really mattered. What was the sizes that you were looking for? You 1/2 ounce, 1/4 ounce? Was it go small, go big?
So a lot of people, right? You think, man, bringing uphill, you're going to get snagged a lot. You'd want a lighter jig. Well, I was actually throwing a lot of 3/4 ounce, especially on day 2, because we had that heavy north wind, kind of high pressure and that front out. And I loved it because Greg was all about fishing out there in that wind, which a lot of people would be like, man, we were taking waves over the bow while we were out there. So, and he was in a awesome Puma STS, which is a big boat, but the waves were big enough. They were coming over the bow on the trolling motor, and we were catching fish left and right. So you kind of need that 3/4 ounce to maintain bottom contact in those kind of situations.
Okay. I mean, I can definitely see that. Now, were you throwing, I guess, the traditional jig, or were you throwing like a hula grub style? What was it that you were throwing?
I was throwing a football jig, a traditional football.
Okay, yeah. rubber skirt or whatever.
Yeah, rubber skirt.
Kind of trailer.
Pumpkin, twin tail, Yamamoto twin tail.
Okay. Very simple, very basic, very just. That's what it is.
Yeah, very basic. But I mean, let's look at our crawdads. They're pretty basic, right? They don't have a bunch of sparks like some of the baits that are in the stores. So keep it basic. And like I said, it's all about the presentation usually.
Okay. Now, you talked about the LV bite going on that was out there. And I know Ryan Hall, he had kind of had that bite going, and he had found that thing a little bit. And Joe had mentioned an A-rig. Now, you live on that lake, and he talked a little bit about how this time of year it's an A-rig bite. Is that something you find? Because I know in November, I'm one of those guys that I love to throw spoons out there. And I heard a lot of guys catching them on big flutter spoons and different things. Is the A-rig and that sort of thing, is a shad bite a part of it, or did it just kind of change so much and just crawdads were the key?
So absolutely. The shad bite is great on this lake. There's a lot. I mean, this lake is full with threadfin shad. So, but in the fall, the majority of the threadfin shad in the lake are in the smaller stages, so like 2 to 3 inch. So umbrella rigs work great. Spoons, all the shaking a minnow, forward facing stuff will work. But I knew from history on this lake that that's kind of what you do to focus on maybe a 15-pound or 18-pound max type bag. I mean, yes, you could catch a big fish on it, but the big fish in this lake eat trout and crawdads. So, and this is the time of year that, right, they don't get big by chasing little tiny bait usually. So they want a big meal or they don't have to work hard for it. So that's why I don't focus too much on that. The whole LV thing, that's more of a reaction bite. So you're getting those resident grass fish that are, in that 4 to 6, maybe 7-pound class that have been living in the grass all summer. And as it's dying back, you're getting them to react to something that's right in their wheelhouse and making them upset when it rips by their face. Right. So that's a little bit different. That's kind of the way I see it. And sure, you could catch a big bass on this lake on a little tiny minnow, but typically they want the easy high calorie meal that they don't have to chase around. So,
okay. With it changing, the water temperature changing, the full moon is out there right now for sure. This upcoming weekend, we got rain coming in. If you're talking to the average guy that's going to go out and do some fishing on Berryessa, and we talked about, I talked with Joe a little bit about how diverse this lake is. You got spot smallmouth, you got largemouth. Tell somebody that's going out there on this weekend that coming up that, maybe fishes there once in a while. Tell them how to catch some fish out there, man. Tell them what you would do and how you would approach this lake.
Yeah. If you want to go out and catch large numbers of fish, and I mean, if you're good with the graph and you want to go scan and find the big bait balls, you can catch a ton of fish on like a 1 3/4 ounce spoon, vertical spooning, or throw the umbrella rig through them. You can catch them on a drop shot or drop shot with a little tiny Kitech swim bait, like a 3.3, something like that. You'll catch a ton of fish doing that. If you're willing to get a few less bites, but you want to get some better bites, tuck that big swim bait. I mean, find any of your major points and go toss it out there, or throw the jig. You'll still get quite a few bites on the jig, but you tend to get the better quality bites than fishing, just the umbrella rig or the spoon. That's at least my opinion from my experience here.
Well, because you're a champion, I think you have a little bit of pull now, so you can people listen up, because he just told you how to go out there and have a good time on this lake. Is this, it's one of the questions I asked Joe is fall one of your favorite times, or is it just such a thing that it's a tough fishery in the fall.
It's a tough fishery in the fall at times. I mean, you can have those wide open days with lots of fish. And I've had some magical, big swim bait days where I hook 6 or 7 fish on a Huddleston in one day or an 11 and a half and an 8 on back-to-back casts. Those kind of days where you're like, holy cow, that's this time of year. But I've also had days out there this time of year where it is extremely tough, and you're thinking, man, what do I got to do to get a bite on this place? I thought I knew this lake. So definitely not my favorite time of year here. I would say pre-spawn is my favorite time of year on this lake. But I would say for fishing tournaments, I really enjoy and feel like I do best during the more grinder style tough bites on this lake, because that's when I feel like a lot of people struggle. Berryessa has kind of been notorious for that, where you either love it or hate it. And for me, when it gets tough for everyone else, that's usually been the tournaments that I end up either winning or doing extremely well in, because of the fact that everyone else is struggling and I know what it's going to take to get some key bites, put me in contention. And I feel like when it's wide open, then it's pretty much anybody's game, right? Any good fisherman can come out when it's good and put something together. So
yeah, it's funny because you say that, and I've talked to Greg Gutierrez, and he is one of those guys that he loves it when it's tough. He has said that, and you kind of pointed that out today. It's like, oh, the wind was blowing, and most people would not be out in the middle of the wind taking waves over the front of their boat to catch fish. But Greg was, and you talk about how when it gets a little more difficult, you're that same way. You kind of like it to be a little tougher out there, and that's saying a lot, because most people, they want to go out when it's sunny and warm and nice and sit out there and catch fish left and right because they're easy to catch. It's saying another thing when you want to become a tournament angler, to go out there and deal with the harshness. We don't get to make a choice. So if the wind's blowing, it's blowing. If it's raining, it's raining. And you have to go out there and deal with that, man. And you did a great job on this tournament, especially showing that off. But Mark, right now, we've got about 5 minutes left, man. I turn this over to you, and I say, tell everybody, you dropped a bunch of knowledge on them. Let them know who just dropped that knowledge, man. Let them know who Mark White is, where they can follow you, where they can find you if they want to watch you in the future as you go turn pro and go out there and keep catching these bass, man.
Hey, I appreciate it. Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm not on social media or do any of that kind of stuff. I'm just another guy that's fisherman that kind of, based on what I do for a living, I kind of keep my private life private. But you can find me fishing on Berryessa or on the BAM Trail. I do frequently fish ABAs and other tournament circuits as well, team tournaments. So, don't be afraid to approach me and come say hello, because I'm a friendly guy, and I'm always out, right? So I don't mind sharing experience and giving you information. So yeah, that's me.
That's all you got. Hey, you know what? And that's gonna happen. Now I'm gonna tell you, as you start to go, if you want to get up in that pro area, now you're not gonna be one of those guys that you said, I'm not gonna try to make a career out of this. You have a great career that you're doing right now. You're out there, and this is probably not gonna be the seeing you on the big stage all the time, but I hopefully you move forward and hopefully you become what you want to be out there. I mean, you've got a great start right here. You've come out here. You just became the co-champion, which is no easy feat to do. I can't stress that enough to anybody listening. I mean, there are some great anglers in the back of the boats right now. Mark's just proven that he is one of them. I know it was on your home body of water, but you made the championship, which means you fish consistently enough all year long to do this thing and to be out there. Take a couple of these minutes then and just tell everybody out there, how do you feel about what you just fished this year? You just fished the inaugural BAM Trail tournament. What'd you think about what we did?
Oh, I think BAM put together an awesome tournament circuit. I'm looking forward to next year, and I couldn't encourage people enough, pros and co's, to fish this event. Everything, it ran smoothly. If you're a co and you're out there and you're thinking about doing this, if you want to learn and actually really learn how to fish and fish tournaments, I really encourage you to do this. You're going to learn a lot. No matter who you draw, you're going to learn stuff. And for those folks who are pros out there trying to figure out what circuits you're going to fish next year, I would highly encourage you try out the BAM Trail. You guys have some great stops up ahead. Some of these waters, like these, I've never even before, but I'm looking forward to it. So,
yeah, I mean, there should be some good ones coming up there. I mean, I don't know. You're probably going to stay down in this area. You're not going to run up and fish those Pacific Northwest ones, but I would imagine. I mean, maybe you are. Maybe you're. That's what you want to go do. I know I like to try new waters, but I'm guessing maybe Pedro and or Pedro, however you want to pronounce it, and then you've got New Maloney's. There's some good waters coming up.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that you're really looking forward to?
I'm kind of looking forward to Shasta just because as a co-angler, it kicked my butt last year or this year. So I'm looking forward to going out and redeeming myself and catching some fish on Shasta. And that event's always fun. It's usually one of the bigger ones of the season, to kick it off. And Bridge Bay is always a great place, which is usually where they launch out of. And so I'm looking forward to that one. And like I said, I kind of like those more of a grinder tournament where, it could be anybody can get into it. And Shasta is one of those lakes where you get a key bite each day, you're definitely in the game. So, looking forward to it. Looking forward to fishing.
Yeah, just looking forward to fishing some good bodies of water out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard great things about New Maloney's, and I just never had a chance to go fish it. So, it'd be kind of neat to fish that. I don't think I'll be running all the way up, into Washington or Oregon to fish. It's a little too far.
I don't know, man. I'm going to tell you right now. I got up to Boardman, Oregon this year. I got out one time. Mark and I took a quick little trip out, did some fishing out there. I wish I could fish that thing. If you get a chance to go fish that Boardman, Oregon, and fish the Columbia River right there, dude, it is fun. There is some good fishing right there out of that body of water. There is amazing smallmouth fishing, like packs of fish. Like you catch one and there's 8 others with it. It is crazy. Yeah, it's definitely fun. And if you get the chance, man, get the time off, you might want to, give it a shot.
Yeah.
But you know what, Mark? I've got to cut it off because we have to pay some bills and get some commercials rolling. So thank you for coming on and doing this, most of all, man. And nothing but mad respect on what you did out there. It is like you just named 3 names that it is not easy to fish against, fish behind, and you did it. You became the champ out there, and congratulations on that. And thank you for coming on and doing the show and telling us about your day and a little bit about what to do when we're out there and how to catch fish on Berryessa, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. And everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope you got a lot of knowledge out of these 2 great anglers. Joe became the Pro-Am champion right there, and Mark White became the co-side Pro-Am champion. So, these guys are 2 good fishermen. They're one from Winters, one from Lake Berryessa. It's all right there, and I hope you get a lot of knowledge. And if you didn't, go back and listen again because you missed something. These guys dropped a bunch of it on you. All right, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show in just a couple weeks.